Hi everyone, my name is Agnieszka and I think that you can easily call me Agi. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you today in this very special way. We gather here today on the occasion of this year's March of the Living. When I was asked to do this presentation for you, I thought that it would be quite challenging to me. But after 14 years of working as Auschwitz Museum as a guide and educator, I thought that it might be a good chance to me also to get you a bit closer to my understanding of Auschwitz. Of course, no one and nothing is going to replace the physical visit at Auschwitz. But due to the pandemic, it's impossible to travel to Poland and be there today on Yom HaShoah. So I would like to give you just a bit of pictures of Auschwitz and share with you my understanding of everything what happened at Auschwitz. I'm going to do it in a very simple way. I'm going to present to you some pictures, views, videos, and I will share with you the testimonies of Auschwitz survivors. So in fact, in the next 50 minutes, I would like to ask you kindly to focus on everything what you're going to see, watch and hear from me, just to make this time meaningful to you and me. I would like to show you two parts of Auschwitz camp, which are known as Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II Birkenau. And Birkenau, as you know, was the place where most of the Jewish victims of Auschwitz were killed. I will take you there thanks to the special collection of photographs of the original site. These are 360 view photographs known as Panorama Auschwitz. And also at some point during our tour, I will use the official photographs from Auschwitz Museum's website and Yad Vashem's website. And also I will show you some private photographs taken by my husband quite recently at Auschwitz site. And you will watch one of the videos made by BBC for March of the Living from Canada 3 years ago. So that's basically the plan, and not to make it too long, this introduction, let's start. Of course, I will not focus so much on numbers and facts, because this is what you can find in books and in the internet. My job is to tell you the story of Auschwitz, and I can say that I will be your storyteller today. Guys, when today we think of Auschwitz, of course, we need to know where this name come from. And I would like to use Google Earth just to make you realize what is and what was the location of Auschwitz. Auschwitz was the German name for the Polish town of Święcim. Yes, and let's see where it is. Yeah. Europe, Poland, and this is Święcim in the south of Poland. Right after the German invasion of Poland in September 1939, and then the Soviet invasion of my country, of course, Poland, as you can see, disappeared from the map of Europe. My country was divided into 3 parts. The eastern part of Poland was to be controlled by the Soviet Union. The central part of Poland, but without the area of Święcim, was to be entirely occupied by Nazi Germany, and the western part of Poland, including this area, was to be entirely incorporated into the Third Reich. So that was the reason when right after the German troops came to the town of Święcim, its name was Germanized. It became the town of Auschwitz. Today, it's a small town populated by 40,000 people. Back then, there were 13,000 residents of the town. I just want to make you see it. So in the suburbs of the town of Święcim in German Auschwitz, the camp was supposed to be established. If we can look at the camp, let's use one of panoramas of Auschwitz. So 1940, there's the idea to have in the area of Auschwitz town the new concentration camp, which of course was supposed to be given the name Auschwitz. And who are the ones who are to be sent to Auschwitz? Who are the ones Auschwitz was meant for? As you may imagine, one of the very first things the Nazi Germans wanted to do when they entered Polish towns and villages was to get rid of those people who could be a threat to the new system. One of Auschwitz survivors taken to the camp, as you can see right now on one of the first transports, Mr. Władysław Bartoszewski, once said to the students who attended the meeting with him that if you had glasses, if you looked too smart, if anyone in your family was a professor, teacher, lawyer, doctor, you had a high chance of being sent to Auschwitz. So basically that was the Polish intelligentsia, members of the Polish leadership class who were supposed to be the first victims of Auschwitz. The first transport of Polish political prisoners arrived to the new concentration camp called Auschwitz in the spring of 1940. Among them were several Polish Jews, but at that time they were coming to Auschwitz not because they were Jewish, but because they were members of the Polish intelligentsia. What I can tell you is that in the beginning of Auschwitz history, it was supposed to be just a minor concentration camp for the political prisoners. Even the commander of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, at that time in 1940, couldn't even suspect that or predict that on one day Auschwitz would become the center for the killing of the Jews. Today, I should say, as you look at the camp, that the final solution to the Jewish question came to Auschwitz later in 1940. If you want to know why right now on your screens you can see these red brick buildings and why this specific location was chosen, I can give you 3 reasons to make you understand it. First of all, the town of Święcim, the town of Auschwitz, was surrounded by 2 rivers. So if you think of the German plan for the camp, you need to understand that it would be so easy to isolate the whole area around the camp, not only the camp itself, because the camp was surrounded by the fence, as you can see. But they thought that it would be so difficult to escape from the area around the camp where the prisoners of Auschwitz were supposed to be sent to work. The second thing, at that time, most of these red brick buildings, as you can see them in the evening, had been already standing there because they had been constructed as the army base before the war. So guys, there was the army base before the war. When you enter Auschwitz I today, you enter the pre-war Polish army barracks. We can look at them from the watchtower. So if the buildings were there, it was so easy, so cheap to take them over and start using them for housing the prisoners of the future camp. And of course, one more thing, the town of Święcim, the town of Auschwitz, was a very important railway junction. So for the future deportations of prisoners to Auschwitz, logistically, it would be so easy to use exactly this location. And this is why the SS choice fell on Auschwitz. Yeah, I have shown you Arbeit macht frei sign, and I would like to do it once again, but from the other perspective. I believe that you know what the sign says. Arbeit macht frei means work makes you free, work brings you or gives you freedom. The sign was made by the Polish prisoner Jan Liwacz, who was one of the very first Polish political prisoners arriving in the camp. He was a locksmith and he was ordered to make a sign in order to follow the pattern of other concentration camps, which had been already in operation in Germany from the pre-war time, like Dachau or Sachsenhausen. As you can see here on the left-hand side, letter B is turned upside down. Some of survivors of Auschwitz said that it was not the coincidence that this letter was put in this way, in the sign. Those survivors said that it must have been made for purpose by Jan Liwacz to show that the prisoners who are in the camp will never resist there. Liwacz personally never referred to this after his survival of Auschwitz. What I have heard from other survivors of Auschwitz is that to many of them, letter B was very symbolic. The fact that it was turned upside down, and every day when they were on the way to work and had to walk through the gate, or when they were coming back to the camp from work, they had to look at the camp and they had to look at the gate and the sign. When they were doing so, when they were entering the camp, they knew that they were entering a completely different reality. The place which was completely different from everything what they had known so far in their life. And even to me, as we enter Auschwitz, as we walk through the gate, letter B to J is very symbolic because it proves that this place was like a different planet, planet Auschwitz, where everything was turned upside down. Yeah. We can see the camp. We are first on the other side of the fence. We are inside the camp, and you can see these brick buildings. As I said, most of them had been constructed before the war. They were 1 story high, so the second flooring, of course, was then added by prisoners. That was the first kind of work they had to do. They had to do some construction works in the camp. They had to build the fence. They had to build the kitchen, the building, which we have seen a couple of seconds ago with all those high chimneys. And this is where they lived, where they slept. Up to 1,000 prisoners to a building. Between 15,000 to 20,000 prisoners could stay at Auschwitz at the time. Who are the prisoners of Auschwitz? First of all, the political prisoners from Polish towns and cities, we can see from the Polish occupied territory. Then in 1941, the Nazis sent to Auschwitz the Soviet prisoners of war. And when the Soviets were at Auschwitz, the camp became too small. So by the end of 1941, it was necessary to start the construction of the second part of the camp, Auschwitz to Birkenau, where I will take you very soon. I can look at the camp in this map. You can see it once again from the watchtower. This is how the SS could watch the prisoners who were inside the camp, because the watchtowers were beyond the fence. This building, the wooden one, was the laundry. Guys, I'm standing right now with you in front of the wall of death, the place where the troublemakers from the camp who resisted in the camp were executed, along with the civilians who decided at some point to help the prisoners of Auschwitz. I always think to myself, I always say to myself that my family was so lucky because they were never caught by the Gestapo. My great-grandfather was never caught by the Gestapo when he was helping his fellow colleagues from the mine. Otherwise, I wouldn't be born into this world. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be looking with you at the wall of death right now. And I think that this is something important what I would like to tell you, because you can understand that there was a kind of inspiration to me to become a guide at Auschwitz. There was something that was calling me to start this job many, many years ago. There were different ways of killing used at Auschwitz: hard labor, starvation, medical experiments, poor accommodation, the lack of sanitation, sickness, shooting, hanging, and the gas chamber. Being killed in the chamber was one of those methods of killing. And right now, on your screens, you can see the building of gas chamber and crematorium #1. Before I will take you to the second part of the camp, where I can say 95% of the Jewish victims of Auschwitz were killed, you need to see this building because it's the only standing gas chamber and crematorium at Auschwitz today. Huge gas chambers and crematoria in Birkenau were destroyed before the liberation. This one was the only one which was left behind by the SS. The building itself had been constructed before the war for the Polish army. As you know, these red brick buildings, which we have seen a couple of seconds ago, these were the army barracks. So this building with the chimney had been standing there when the camp was set up in the spring of 1940. Before the war, it had been used as the storage for weapons. When the Germans came, the camp was set up. Very quickly, they realized that because there were prisoners dying in the camp of different reasons, there had to be the crematorium operating. So this building was turned into the crematorium. When in 1941, they successfully tested a new mean of killing, Zyklon B gas, on the prisoners of Auschwitz. The largest section inside this building was turned into the gas chamber. What I can tell you is it was the smallest of all gas chambers and crematoria which they had on the ground of Auschwitz complex. And it was the most primitive one because there was nothing like what they had in Birkenau later on. What I can tell you is that this building had only 2 sections inside and everything there was on ground level. There was no section underground like it was in Birkenau. The end of 1941 and the beginning of 1942 was the time when the first groups of Polish Jews were brought to Auschwitz to be exterminated. So they started with the Polish Jewry from nearby towns and villages. What we know, and we can assume that from testimonies of prisoners whose job was to operate the chamber and the crematorium at Auschwitz I, is that the victims brought to Auschwitz at that time were told that they were coming to the labor camp and that before being taken into the camp, they need to delouse themselves. They need to undergo a sort of disinfection procedure. So here in front of the building, we can imagine they were stopped, and here they were told that they had to prepare themselves to the shower. This was the place where probably they had to undress, and then we can imagine that naked they could enter the building, as we are doing together right now. Just to make you see where is the entrance. So they walked in through this door and then they were turning right. They had to walk through this small room, which was kind of the storage. Just to make you see how small it is. Yeah. And they went straight into the largest section. It was a makeshift gas chamber. What we know is that there were no installations, no imitations of shower heads, as they were later on in gas chambers of Birkenau. So no showers, no water pipes on the walls, but there was something in the ceiling, which of course today proves that that was the gas chamber. The special square openings in the ceiling. This is how then the SS disinfectors could introduce the gas, Zyklon B pellets, into the chamber. The historians claim that between 600 to 700 people could be crammed in the chamber. And I will not risk saying what was the time needed to kill 700 people. We can make some calculations. We can say 45 up to an hour, but no one is, sure about this. So I will not give you this information because, to be honest with you, we don't know. What we know about is that when the killing was over, the bodies must have been taken into the crematorium, which was just next door. You can see the crematorium furnaces. These are the reconstructions made of original iron elements found in this building on the Liberation Day. So just before the liberation, the SS had this idea to destroy everything that was inside, what could prove that it was the crematorium, but most of those elements were found, so the reconstructions of those furnaces were made. From the official documentation on crematorium from Birkenau and Auschwitz I, which were not destroyed. First, I'm thinking about the documentation which was not destroyed, which was left behind. We know that the daily capacity of crematorium number 1 was 348 corpses. Just to remind you, 700 could be killed at a time. So then the SS needed 2 days to get rid of corpses. And if we can look at the building again, believe me, that in the spring of 1942, the SS realized that it became too small. But a huge enterprise called it the famous solution to the Jewish question. They didn't want to do the killing 3 times a week. They wanted to do it every day. So the decision was made to move the whole killing process from Auschwitz I to Birkenau, and this is where most of the Jews were killed. The iconic image of Auschwitz. Yeah, we'll have a chance to be inside the watchtower, but first I would like to show you the camp from above. So let's use this map. The red dot, this is where right now we are. And to say it very briefly, Auschwitz-Birkenau was constructed because Auschwitz I, as the concentration camp, was too small. They didn't have enough space for the prisoners at Auschwitz I, so the idea was to build the extension of Auschwitz I, 3 kilometers away from the first part of the camp. There was the village there before the war, which of course got destroyed. People living there were taken to the camps in Germany, and then the prisoners of Auschwitz were to destroy the houses and start the construction of Auschwitz-Birkenau. And as you can see right now on this map, it was much bigger than Auschwitz I. We say that it was 25 times bigger than the first part. 5 times more prisoners could stay in the whole camp. And just to make you see how big it was. Okay. It is as big as far your eyes can see right now. Where is the horizon? 1 square mile. And that's the size of the camp. You can see the train tracks and the unloading ramp inside the camp. You can see that the camp was surrounded by the barbed wire fence. The idea was to keep the security as tight as possible. The prisoners were not to escape from the camp. The idea was to make it impossible for them to escape. Another view. The camp must have been subdivided into different sections because at one time even 95,000 prisoners could be there. And of course, they were the ones who were to be used for slave labor. So look at the camp in the winter panorama. Right now you can see the wooden huts and the ruins of the barracks, which were within this part of the camp, all those chimneys. These are the remnants of the wooden huts. Those buildings were destroyed or dismantled after the war, when it became clear that Auschwitz Museum wouldn't be able to preserve all the structures standing there because of the lack of funds. So some wooden huts were preserved for you and me in the camp, just close to the main gate. The other buildings are gone, but all the brick buildings, as you can see them right now, which are there today, are standing there from the time of the camp. What I always say whenever I start the tour at Birkenau is that the brick buildings, these are like Polish houses, because guys, when the village called Brzezinka, which name was then changed to Birkenau, was destroyed in order to use that site for the purpose of the camp, the bricks from destroyed houses were to be used for the construction of these barracks for the prisoners. So these brick structures are still there. And this was the section for women. We always say that the brick part was the part for women, the wooden section was the part for men. Women were to work in the fields and supply the German army with food from the east. Men, we can look again, were to work in factories and mines and supply the German army with coal and weapons. We'll be talking about, their accommodation and sanitation in a moment, because I will take you into some of these wooden huts. But before that, let me say some words about the train tracks and the ramp. Guys, 1944, the peak of the killing at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Gas chambers and crematoria, which were in the most distant part of the camp, right here, were to work 24 hours because 24 hours, 24/7, because the Jews of Hungary were coming to the camp, and especially for that operation, for the killing of Hungarian Jews, these train tracks were extended into the camp. The unloading platform must have been constructed inside the camp to make the whole process faster, to speed up the killing of Hungarian Jews. 1944, just to remind you of it, that was the moment when Nazi Germans were losing the war. I believe that many of them at that time realized that the war was coming to an end and that they wouldn't win that war. Nevertheless, one of the priorities at that time was to finish the extermination of European Jewry. So the Hungarian Jews, the largest group of Jewish people sent to Auschwitz, nearly 500,000, came to Auschwitz 7 months before its liberation. We'll be there on the platform in a moment, but first, let's see how the prisoners who were in the camp were supposed to live. The wooden huts they were held in were originally stables. These were prefabricated stables brought to Birkenau from Germany. Then, of course, they were adapted to be used as barracks where the prisoners would sleep. And as you can see, they were very primitive buildings. There was nothing special inside. No windows, no insulation on the walls, leaking roof, freezing cold in the winter, extremely hot in the summer. 400 or even more prisoners could be kept in such a building at a time. This brick structure, which you can see in the center of the barrack, it's the heating system. If the German conception was to make people live in the camp roughly 2 or 3 months, and during that time use the prisoners for labor, we have to say the barracks must have been heated. But it doesn't mean that the prisoners were supplied with fuel all the time in the winter. So that's why I said that it was freezing cold in these barracks. You can see the bunk beds, no beddings, no pillows, only straw on this shelves here, and of course blankets in the winter given to cover up. 5 to 7 prisoners were to sleep on one level, so there could be even 21 on the whole bunk. Survivors of Auschwitz whom I've met said that you could stand almost everything in the camp. The fact that it was smelly, stinky, it was cold, it was hot, it was overcrowded. This is what in some way you could get used to, but what you couldn't stand was the fact that there was no sanitation in these buildings where they slept. I think that none of us can imagine what must have been happening in this building with 400 people locked in for the whole night time and 2 buckets which they could use as a toilet place at night. Latrines and washrooms were in the separate buildings. And I would like to show you one of them. Again, nothing special. These are the toilet holes, and I do not use the name toilets, I use the name the latrine with the toilet holes. The building of the same size like the previous one, which I showed you for 400 people, was supposed to be the place where at one time more than 2,000 prisoners would get access to. And what we know is that people were given 10-15 minutes twice a day before and after work to get into these buildings where the sanitation was. Wash themselves in the washroom, which used to be in this part of the building, and then use this latrine. 20-25 seconds per person to sit down here above the hole and relieve himself or herself. If there's no paper given, no privacy, no option to wash hands afterwards. Guys, my job is to make you understand that the death camp was everywhere at Auschwitz, that Auschwitz itself was like the place of death for everyone. And your death at Auschwitz was just a matter of time. What I said is that there were 9 ways of killing at Auschwitz: hard labor, sickness, medical experiments, starvation, shooting, hanging, and also this. If you couldn't keep your body clean, if you couldn't wash your hands, face, other parts of your body, if you couldn't, keep your clothing clean, sooner or later you would get sick. If you were sick, you were already dead. And I can tell you that there was no one who was going to look after you. No one cared about weak or sick prisoners because, when they died, the dead ones were supposed to be replaced by the new ones coming to the camp. So there was that constant rotation in the camp. Okay, we can leave this section, the prisoners. As you know, we are here to focus on what happened to the Jewish people sent to Auschwitz. So let's look at Auschwitz from this perspective. So the springtime or the summertime, the section where female prisoners were to be kept in. And Frank, when she came to Auschwitz in 1944, after her selection, she got into this part of the camp. She was Jewish, brought to Auschwitz to be killed, but because she was fit for labor with her sister and mom, they were taken into the camp. This part was this huge, large section for men, mostly. And what was in between the selection place and the platform? As I said, in 1944, the largest group of Jews coming to Auschwitz, the Jews of Hungary, within 56 days, between May and July 1944, 438,000 Jews of Budapest were put on the trains and were sent directly into Auschwitz to Birkenau. And around 400,000 of them got selected to be killed. So they never entered the barracks in the camp. And from here, I would like to take you to the other footages and photographs from the special collection of 193 pictures taken by SS in 1944 when there was the Hungarian operation of Auschwitz. The collection of these pictures is known as the Auschwitz album. And I just want to make you see the moment when the trains arrived in the camp. One of Auschwitz survivors, Max Eisen, whom I've met, writing his book by chance alone about the conditions of deportation to the camp. And this is what I would like to read right now. So keep looking at this picture and listen to me. This is what Max writes. 100 people and their bundles were crammed into each car. We were stuck together standing room only and could hardly breathe properly because the heat generated by our bodies made the air unbearable. There was only a small barred opening near the ceiling for ventilation. Water was gone almost immediately and it was never replaced. The toilet pail was not emptied because the door was never opened. This is the quote from his book. Max Eisen was 15 when he was sent to the camp with his family, 2 younger brothers, his sister, parents, grandparents, his uncle and aunt. And what he writes in his book is that they spent on the train 3 long days and nights. When you look at this train cars, we have to remember that these were the trains, the cars designed for cargo or animals. And when I'm talking about different ways of killing, I should say that the conditions of deportation, and they were one of those ways of killing. Look at the car, at this wagon once again. 100 people could be inside. What we know is that in some cases, people traveled for more than a week with no food, no water after some time. The train could slow down, could stop, but they were never let out of it. So the wagon, which stands at Birkenau today, symbolizes the beginning of the killing. We cannot forget about the journey whenever we think of the extermination of the Jews. There is a story of this wagon, which I'm not going to deliver to you today. That will be the task for you to find it and learn more about why this particular wagon is there. And you already know what it symbolizes. Yeah, so the trains stopped inside the camp in 1944. As you can see, people were told to get off the train. In this picture, you may see all of them with bags and suitcases. The European Jewry sent to Auschwitz from Western countries, such as France, Holland, Belgium, Norway, Germany, Italy, Greece, and then Hungary. Of course, they were not told that they were going to the extermination camp. The propaganda was saying that they were going for work or that they would be relocated, resettled. And they were allowed to take with them some personal stuff. So when they got to the camp, when they finally left the trains, they were told to leave all their belongings behind. And then they were divided into 2 groups. Basics. The SS doctors who were to perform the selections, dressed in the SS uniforms, as this man standing in the center of this picture.
We are back there. Just to remind you, this was the road to death the victims had to take to get to the most distant part of the camp where gas chambers and crematoria operated. Today, there you're going to find only the ruins because those buildings were blown up by the Germans a week before the liberation. So this is what you find there when you come. Gas chambers and crematoria at Birkenau must have been designed by the professional designers who knew the whole conception of the killing. And what is more, I need to tell you that each of those buildings designed to be used for the extermination had 3 sections. In front of us here, the first part that people were in was the changing room. Yes, you can see it. Then the second section, that was the gas chamber, the ruins of which we are looking at right now. And these 2 parts were underground for a very simple reason. First of all, it was much easier to control the crowd. No one would run away. And the second thing, as long as you keep them underground, it's easier to hide the crime and keep it secret. The only part of the building which was underground, that was the crematorium. Yeah, the ruins of which are in front of us right now. Let's get back to the ruins of the undressing room. Whenever I'm there with my visitors, I always stop the groups right here by the ruins, and I always ask them to find the steps which led the people to the undressing room. And when they do so, I say to them, and I can do it right now, and I can say to you that as you can see the steps, believe me that there was the boundary between life and death, because those who went down that way never came back. There were benches in the undressing room. On the walls were the hooks with the numbers where people were told to leave their stuff. And what we know is that loving mothers were told to remember the number of the hook, and Jewish children were told to tie together shoelaces, to keep the shoes together, not to lose them. Of course, you may ask me at what stage people realized what was waiting for them. When was the moment when they knew that death was just around the corner? And guys, after 14 years of working at Auschwitz, I can tell you, I don't know. I think that no one knows the answer to this question. But we need to keep asking these questions because we have a lot of stories of survivors. And we have the diaries of prisoners whose job was to operate the crematoria furnaces in Birkenau, just like in Auschwitz I, and whose job was to be with the victims in the undressing room and give them the instructions, what they have to do. That was the group of Sonderkommando prisoners, the Jewish men who were especially selected to do this heavy physical work, drag the bodies out of the chamber after the killing, and then deal with the corpses and be responsible for the cremation of corpses. Now, it's obvious that most of those Jewish men didn't survive Auschwitz. They had been working in the camp for 5 or 6 weeks, then they got killed because they knew too much, and the new ones got selected to continue that work. However, because they knew that they were the only eyewitnesses of the German crime, some of them decided to keep writing diaries, like Zaumen Gradowski. And they buried the diaries in the area of crematoria at Birkenau just before the uprising, which they started in October 1944, during which a lot of them got killed by the SS. Those diaries were found after the war. So thanks to the stories from the diaries of Sonderkommando and the stories of survivors of Auschwitz, it's possible to put the puzzles together to create for you this wide and complete picture of Auschwitz. We'll be leaving Panorama Auschwitz in a moment. I will be leaving you. I will be saying the last words at the end of our tour. So just to make you look at the camp one more time from this perspective. Guys, we will never be able to know all the stories of Auschwitz, all the stories of survivors, but we do not have to listen to the words. First of all, we should see the place, experience the place, and have some reflection on everything what happened there. When I started working at Auschwitz in 2007, I've made a promise to myself that never ever in my life I will be indifferent. Because this is what Auschwitz teaches me today. I made that promise to myself that if there will be any sort of injustice around me, the injustice I will witness in my life, I will take a stand. Otherwise, what you can see here on your screens may happen again. One more thing to show you and leave you with some reflection. Pictures of personal belongings of the Jewish victims of Auschwitz. This is how we can touch the story of Auschwitz today. The small collection of belongings found in the camp on the Liberation Day, belongings which the SS was not able to ship back to Germany and recycle. So piles of shoes, suitcases, brushes, glasses are at Auschwitz I, where is the main exhibition. And because we can't be there today, we went there with my husband some time ago and we took some photographs, and please let me share with you those pictures. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for being with me, and I'm leaving you right now. I've met Max Eisen a couple of times in my life, and I will never forget what he once said, that the only thing he regrets in his life is no goodbye said to his mother. This is Max Eisen. You can see him right now, and let's watch together what he wants us to know about his experience at Auschwitz.
The memory of my mother going with her 3 children, with my little baby sister and my 2 younger brothers, going into the gas chamber is the worst memory that I carry with me for the rest of my life. My name is Max Eisen, and I'm a survivor of Auschwitz. I saw her walk. I remember all I could see was her back, carrying a baby in her arm, and my 2 little brothers. There were no goodbyes said. I was 15 years old when I arrived here, May of 1944, A9892, Hungarian transports. Here we are. I want you to sort of try to smell what this place smells like. Can you hear the voices? Scratches with their hands. They were trying to go through cement walls just to get away from the gas that was killing them. Imagine 2,000 people fighting each other for a breath of air. You could say that this is the last will and testament of people who died here. From darkness to light, what a wonderful thing it is to know that you're alive. I'm thinking of my family who have no markers, no graves, whose ashes have been blown to the four corners of the earth. I don't know how I survived. I'm amazed how I survived. I'd like to tell a lot to the world. Respect each other, no matter what religion or color you are. Hatred against Jewish people is alive and well all over the world. I come back here to tell others not to go down this terrible road of hatred and intolerance. And it's a warning. Beware. This place reminds you to beware of hatred.